Okay, welcome everybody to Season 4 of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. I'm Jason Icanio, and boy, it's been a while since we've delved into some of our wonderful footage of looking back at the retro toys and games of our childhood, of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, possibly even the 90s. Today we're going to be delving into the continuation of the console wars. We looked at the Atari 2600. We looked at the 5200. We looked at Atari overall. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a very interesting console that after the 5200 flop, well, this one dominated because it was the last thing Atari could do to save itself from utter destruction. Well, who are we talking about? What are we talking about? The Atari 7800. That's what we're looking at tonight on Jay's Retro Toys and Games. Okay, welcome everybody to the show, and hope that you had a fantastic 2025 so far. We have had tremendous feedback on Season 3 at all of the seasons of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. You are just amazing subscribers. In fact, we just gained a subscriber on the All TV channel today, so we're sitting at 142 subs. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, because that's how you'll get all of our updates, especially now that we are Season 4. This is episode 70 of Jay's Retro Toys and Games for Tuesday, September 16th, 2025. Let's take a look at the Atari 7800 and the history. Designed as a pro system by an outside company called the General Computer Corporation. It was developed in 1983 to 84 with an intended mass market rollout in June of 84, but was canceled after the sale of the company to Trammell Technology Ltd. On July 2nd of 84. The project was originally called the Atari 3600. With a background in creating arcade games such as Food Fight, GCC designed the new system with a graphics architecture similar to arcade machines of the time. The CPU is a slightly customized 6502 processor, the Atari Sally, running at 1.79 megahertz. By some measures, the 7800 is more powerful, and by others, less than the 1983 Nintendo Entertainment System. It uses the 2600's television interface adapter chip with the same restrictions for generating 2 channels of audio. The 7800 was announced on May 21st of 84. 13 games were announced for the system's launch. Ms. Pac-Man, Pole Position 2, Centipede, Joust, Dig Dug, Nile Flyer, eventually released as Desert Falcon, Robotron 2084, Galaga, Food Fight, Ball Blazer, Rescue on Fractalis, later canceled, Track and Field, and Xevious. It was a significant technological leap over the Atari 2600 and, of course, the 5200. But then on July 2nd, 1984, Warner Communications sold Atari's consumer division to Jack Trammell. All projects were halted during an initial evaluation period, and GCC had not been paid for their development of the 7800, and Warner and Trammell fought over who was accountable. Then in May of 85, Trammell relented and paid GCC. This led to additional negotiations regarding the launch titles GCC had developed, then an effort to find someone to lead their new video game division, which was completed in November of '85. The original production run of the Atari 7800 languished in warehouses until it was introduced in January of '86. The console was released nationwide in May of '86 for $79.95, with games intended for the 7800's debut in '84. It was aided by a marketing campaign with a budget in the low millions, according to Atari Corporation officials. This was substantially less than the $9 million spent by Sega and the $16 million spent by Nintendo. The keyboard and high-score cartridge planned by Warner were canceled, and the 7800 addressed many of the most common complaints with the preceding 5200, including a smaller size, built-in backward compatibility, and an improved control design. Then in February '87, Computer Entertainer reported that 100,000 Atari 7800 consoles had been sold in the United States, including those which had been warehoused since 1984. This was less than the Master System's 125,000 and the NES's 1.1 million. Games were slowly released, Galaga in August, followed by Xevious in November. And by the end of '86, the 7800 had 10 games compared to Sega's 20 and Nintendo's 36. Atari would sell over 1 million 7800 consoles by June of '88. The Atari 7800 was released in the UK in September of '89 at a price of £69.95. It was supplied with 2 joypad controllers. On January 1st, 1992, Atari Corporation announced the end of production and support for the 7800, the 2600, and the 8-bit computer family, including the Atari XEGS. At least one game, an unreleased port of Toki, was worked on past this date. And by the time of the discontinuation, the Nintendo Entertainment System controlled 80% of the North American market, while Atari had only 12%. In Europe, last stocks of the 7800 were sold until summer or fall of '95. Retro Gamer magazine issued 132 reported that, according to Atari UK marketing manager Daryl Still, it was very well stocked by European retail, although it never got the consumer traction that the 2600 did. I remember we used to sell a lot of units through mail order catalogs and in the less affluent areas. The technical specifications for all you nerdy people out there who love to tinker and go with this stuff. The CPU is the Atari Sally. It's got 1.79 megahertz, which drops to 1.19 when the television interface adapter chips are accessed. And unlike a standard 6502, Sally can be halted in a known state with a single pin to let other devices control the bus. Sometimes referred to by Atari as a 6502C, but not the same as the official MOS technology. 4 kilobytes of RAM. ROM has 4 kilobytes BIOS RAM, 48 kilobytes cartridge ROM space without bank switching. Graphics, Maria custom chip. Resolution 160 by 240 or 320 by 240 on the pixels. Color palette 256. Different graphics modes restricted the number of usable colors and the number of colors per sprite. You had direct memory access, the graphics clock, 7.15 megahertz, line buffer, 200 bytes. You know the whole deal. It also came with 2 joystick ports, cartridge port, expansion connector, power in, RF output, and the sound. TIA used in the 2600 for video and sound. In the 7800 mode, it is only used for sound. At least 3 games included a Pokey sound chip for improved audio. Graphics are generated by the custom Maria chip, which used an approach common in contemporary arcade system boards, and is different from the other second and third generation consoles. Instead of a limited number of hardware sprites, Maria treats everything as a sprite described in a series of display lists, and each display list contains pointers to graphics, data, and color and positioning information. It also supports a palette, that is Maria, of 256 colors and graphics modes, which are either 160 pixels wide or 320 pixels wide. And while the 320 pixel modes theoretically enable the 7800 to create games at higher resolution than the 256 pixel wide graphics found in the Nintendo Entertainment System and Master System, The processing demands of Maria result in most games using the 160 pixel mode. Each sprite can have from 1 to 12 colors, with 3 colors plus transparency being the most common. In this format, the sprite references one of 8 palettes, where each of palette holds about 3 colors, and the background can also be assigned a color, and in total 25 colors can appear on a scan line. The graphics resolution, color palettes, and background color can be adjusted between scan lines. 7800 uses a TIA chip for 2-channel audio, the same chip used in the 1977 Atari VCS, and the sound is of the same quality as that system. To compensate, GCC's engineers allowed games to include a Pokey audio chip in the cartridge. 3 games do this: Ball Blazer, Commando, and Tiger Healy. GCC planned to make a low-cost, high-performance sound chip, Gumby, which could also be placed in the 7800 cartridges to enhance its sound capabilities further. This project was canceled when Atari was sold to Jack Trammell. Following the large number of low-quality third-party games for the Atari 2600, Atari required that cartridges for the 7800 be digitally signed. And when a cartridge is inserted into the system, the BIOS generates a signature of the cartridge ROM and compares it to the one stored on the cartridge. If they match, the console operates in 7800 mode, granting the game access to Maria and other features. Otherwise, the console operates as a 2600. And this digital signature code is not present in PAL 7800s or PAL 7800s, which use various heuristics to detect 2600 cartridges due to export restrictions. The 7800's compatibility with the Atari 2600 is made possible by including many of the same chips used in the 2600. When playing an Atari 2600 game, the 7800 uses a television interface adapter chip to generate graphics and sound. The processor is slowed to 1.19 megahertz to mirror the performance of the 2600's 6507 chip. RAM, or the RAM, is limited to 128 bytes, and cartridge data is accessed in 4K blocks. But when it's in 7800 mode, signified by the appearance of the full-screen Atari logo, the graphics are generated entirely by the Maria Graphics Processing Unit. All system RAM is available, and cartridge data is accessed in larger 48K blocks. The system's Sally 6502 runs at its normal 1.79 megahertz. The 2600 chips are used to generate sound and to provide the interfaces to the controllers and console switches. There were different system revisions and the peripherals. The Atari 7800 came bundled with the Atari ProLine joystick, a 2-button controller with a joystick for movement, and the ProLine was developed for the 2600 and advertised in '83, but delayed until Atari proceeded with the 7800. The right fire button only works as a separate fire button for certain 7800 games. Otherwise, it duplicates the left fire button, allowing either button to be used for 2600 games. And while physically compatible, the 7800's controllers do not work with the Sega Master System, and Sega's controllers are unable to use the 7800's 2-button mode. In response to criticism over ergonomic issues with the ProLine controllers, Atari released a joypad controller with the European 7800. Similar in style to controllers found on Nintendo and Sega systems, it was not available in the United States. The Atari XG1 light gun, bundled with the Atari XEGS and also sold separately, is compatible with the 7800. They released 5 7800 light gun games: Alien Brigade, Barnyard Blaster, Crossbow, Meltdown, and Sentinel. And after the acquisition of the Atari Consumer Division by Jack Trammell in '84, several expansion options for the system were canceled. The high score cartridge was designed to save high scores for up to 65 separate games. The cartridge was intended as a pass-through device, similar to the later game Genie. 9 games were programmed to support the cartridge, and the expansion port to allow for the addition of a planned computer keyboard in connection to Laserdisc players and other peripherals was removed in the second and third revisions of the 7800. A dual joystick holder was designed for Robotron 2084 and future games like Battlezone, but not produced. Then it goes on with the games, which that's a whole different beast in its own right. Then they had the ones for the flashback, the game development, the source codes. There was a 7800 Plus in 2024. And basically, that's all there is to it about the 7800 that would interest you. Like I said before, friends, the 7800 was the answer to the 5200's flop. As many of you know through James the Nintendo Nerd, he basically gave the 7800 and the 2600 better grades as far as compatibility. And as we can see in the 5200 was a complete flop. If you got the darn thing to work. That was the thing. If it didn't work, according to James, you could have a lot of frustration, but it made for one hell of a video. And that video has over 1 million views, probably even more to this day, because we can honestly see the frustration of James, the Nintendo Nerd, basically coming out. And in those early days of AVGN, you knew that it was probably a very interesting video because of the way he put all of that together to piece it, to make the 5200 a total flop. But if you owned a 5200, then you're one of the very few people that actually could put up with the darn thing. I know my aunt had a 2600, and I didn't get my first console until 1982, which was the ColecoVision. But we're going to be talking about the next console, and that is the Intellivision. And that came before the ColecoVision. Came around the 81, probably, right at the same time. And then the ColecoVision kind of bounced up on that one. So on our next episode of the Console Wars, we're going to be looking at Intellivision and then bounce to ColecoVision. All of that on this new season of Jay's Retro Toys and Games. I want to thank you very much for your great continued support of this show. It's been a while since we were gone away, but we are definitely back and we're ready to go for another round of wonderful retro toys and games. And of course, we're in the games right now, the Console Wars. And we hope that you will enjoy this just as much as anything that we've given you before. Till Thursday, with the Intellivision, I'm Jason Icanio. Have a great night. We'll see you again. Bye for now.